At my brother's wedding, my parents demanded I hand over my penthouse to Carlos. When I refused, Dad slapped me before 100 guests, so I smiled and whispered, "You just lost me." My name is Sushila Wilson, and I learned a long time ago that being the family disappointment has its perks, like living 2,000 miles away from the drama. But when my little brother Tommy's wedding invitation arrived at my Manhattan penthouse, embossed with gold lettering that probably cost more than most people's rent, I knew I couldn't avoid going home to Denver any longer. Tommy had always been the golden boy. Star quarterback at Boulder High, full scholarship to Colorado State, now marrying his college sweetheart Rebecca in what Mom kept calling the wedding of the century. Meanwhile, I was the black sheep who dared to leave Colorado, build my own tech company, and heaven forbid, actually succeed without the family's help. The flight to Denver gave me 3 hours to prepare myself for what was coming. I knew they'd have something to say about my success, especially since I'd bought the penthouse overlooking Central Park last year. The real estate blogs had picked up the story. Tech entrepreneur, 28, drops $12 million on Manhattan dream home. I'd hoped my parents hadn't seen it, but that was wishful thinking. As I stepped off the plane in my tailored black dress and Louboutin heels, I spotted Mom and Dad immediately. Mom's face was tight with that familiar expression of disapproval, mixed with barely contained excitement. Dad looked like he was sizing up a business deal. Behind them stood Carlos, my older cousin who'd never held a job for more than 6 months, but somehow remained the family's favorite charity case. "Sushila, darling." Mom rushed forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You look successful." The way she said it made success sound like a disease. Dad was more direct. "We need to talk. Family meeting tonight, after the rehearsal dinner." Carlos just smirked, running his fingers through his greasy hair. "Hey, little cousin. Heard you've been doing well for yourself up in New York." I should have gotten back on that plane right then. Should have trusted the knot forming in my stomach. But Tommy was my brother, and despite everything, I loved him. So I smiled, hugged them all, and pretended not to notice how Carlos's eyes lingered on my Hermes bag like he was already calculating its worth. The rehearsal dinner at the Broadmoor was exactly what I expected, a display of wealth meant to impress people who were already impressed. Tommy looked genuinely happy with Rebecca, which made my heart warm. But every time I caught Mom whispering to the aunts while looking in my direction, that warmth faded a little more. "Family meeting in the presidential suite," Dad announced as dessert was served. 10 minutes. I excused myself and headed upstairs, my heels clicking against the marble floors like a countdown timer. Whatever they wanted, it wasn't going to be good. What could my family possibly want that required such secrecy? Little did I know, I was about to discover just how far they were willing to go. The presidential suite looked like a war room. Mom sat primly on the velvet sofa, Dad paced by the window, and Carlos lounged in the leather armchair like he owned the place. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle Frank flanked the sofa. Clearly this was bigger than just my parents. "Sit down, Sushila," Dad commanded, gesturing to the chair across from Carlos. I remained standing. 30 years of his controlling behavior had taught me that sitting meant surrendering the power position. "I'll stand, thanks. What's this about?" Mom jumped in with her practiced tone of wounded motherhood. "It's about family, sweetheart. It's about taking care of our own." "Carlos has been going through a rough patch," Dad continued, his voice taking on that businessman cadence I knew too well. "His startup failed, his wife left him, and he's about to lose his house." I glanced at Carlos, who had the decency to look embarrassed. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure what this has to do with me." Uncle Frank leaned forward. "Carlos needs a fresh start. Somewhere he can rebuild, get back on his feet. Somewhere like New York." The room fell silent except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. I could see where this was heading, but I needed them to say it. "Your penthouse," Mom said finally. "It's so big for just one person. And Carlos's family. You want me to let Carlos live in my apartment?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Not live in it," Dad corrected. "We want you to sign it over to him. Completely. It's time you learned about family responsibility." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sign over my penthouse, the home I'd worked 18-hour days for 3 years to afford, to Carlos, who couldn't keep a job at a coffee shop. "Absolutely not," I said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Sushila, Aunt Patricia's voice was sharp. Carlos has always been there for this family. When your grandfather was sick, who took care of him? When your grandmother needed someone to drive her to church every Sunday, who stepped up? Carlos has given everything to this family. And what have you given? Uncle Frank added. You disappeared to New York, barely call, miss Christmas, miss birthdays. You made your money and forgot where you came from. I built my company from nothing, I shot back. I worked 80-hour weeks, I risked everything I had, and I succeeded. That penthouse isn't just a house, it's proof that I can take care of myself without relying on anyone else. Without relying on family, you mean? Mom said, tears welling in her eyes. Do you know how it feels to have a daughter who thinks she's too good for her own people? Carlos finally spoke up. Look, Sushila, I know it's a big ask, but I'm desperate here. I've got nothing left. The penthouse would give me a chance to start over, maybe get into the New York tech scene like you did. Then get your own apartment, I said. Start your own company. Do what I did. With what money? Carlos laughed bitterly. Not everyone has your luck. Luck. The word came out sharper than I intended. I haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in 5 years. I've sacrificed relationships, health, and yes, family time to build what I have. That's not luck, that's work. Dad stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression harder than I'd ever seen it. Work that was only possible because of the foundation this family gave you. The education we paid for, the values we taught you, the love we showed you. Everything you have, you owe to us. And now it's time to pay it back, Mom added softly. I looked around the room at these people I'd loved my whole life, and realized I was seeing them clearly for the first time. This wasn't about family loyalty, this was about entitlement. No, I said again, louder this time. I won't do it. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Dad stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. Then maybe it's time you learned what family really means, Sushila. Tomorrow, in front of everyone at the wedding, you're going to announce that you're giving Carlos the penthouse. Or you're going to find out what happens when you turn your back on the people who made you. The threat hung in the air like smoke. But I had no idea that tomorrow, everything I thought I knew about my family was about to shatter completely. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Dad's threat echoing in my head. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. I wasn't backing down, no matter what they did. The morning of Tommy's wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect Colorado day that makes you believe in fairy tales. The ceremony was being held at the Garden of the Gods, with the reception following at the Cheyenne Mountain Resort. Everything looked picture-perfect from the outside, just like our family always had. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing my outfit like armor. A stunning emerald green dress that had cost more than Carlos made in a month, paired with jewelry that caught the light like tiny weapons. If they wanted to make this about money and status, I'd show them exactly what success looked like. Tommy found me in the hotel lobby before the ceremony. Hey sis. You look incredible. His smile was genuine, and for a moment, I remembered why I'd come home. You clean up pretty well yourself, I said, adjusting his tie. How are the nerves? Surprisingly good. Rebecca has this way of making everything feel right, you know. He paused, studying my face. You okay? You seem tense. I forced a smile. Just the usual family stuff. Don't worry about it, today's about you and Rebecca. But Tommy knew me too well. Did they say something to you? About the penthouse? My blood turned to ice. What do you know about the penthouse? Carlos may have mentioned something about you helping him get back on his feet. I told him that didn't sound like something you'd agreed to. Tommy's eyes searched my face. Please tell me they didn't actually ask you to. Tommy. I put my hands on his shoulders. Today is your wedding day. Whatever happens, remember that Rebecca loves you, and you love her. That's all that matters. Can you promise me that? He nodded slowly, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Just, be careful, okay? Mom and Dad have been acting weird all week. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Rebecca looked radiant in her grandmother's vintage dress, and Tommy's face when he saw her walking down the aisle made my heart ache with happiness for them. For an hour, I forgot about threats and ultimatums and just celebrated my little brother finding his person. But as the guests moved from the ceremony to the cocktail hour, I felt the weight of watching eyes. Mom kept shooting meaningful looks in my direction. Dad was working the crowd, but I caught him checking his watch repeatedly. Carlos had positioned himself near the bar, holding court with our cousins, laughing too loudly at his own jokes. "Beautiful ceremony," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Rebecca's maid of honor, Emma, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "It really was," I agreed, accepting the glass gratefully. "I'm Emma, by the way. Rebecca's told me so much about you. The successful entrepreneur sister who conquered New York." I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. "That's one way to put it. She also said your family can be complicated." "That's definitely one way to put it." Emma glanced around the reception area, where guests were mingling and laughing. "Well, whatever family drama might be brewing, just remember, you don't owe anyone your happiness. Not even family." Her words hit me like a revelation. Here was this stranger, seeing in 5 minutes what I'd been blind to for 30 years. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I think I needed to hear that." The dinner bell chimed, and guests began filing into the main reception hall. It was decorated like something from a magazine: fairy lights, white roses, elegant linens that probably cost more than most people's cars. Tommy and Rebecca's sweetheart table sat at the front, with the family tables arranged in a careful hierarchy around them. I found my seat at the family table, right between Carlos and Uncle Frank. Subtle. As the salad course was served, Dad stood up, tapping his knife against his wine glass. The room fell quiet. "Before we begin our celebration, I'd like to take a moment for some family business," he announced, his smile not reaching his eyes. My stomach dropped. He wasn't going to wait until after dinner. He was doing this now, in front of everyone, with Tommy and Rebecca right there. "As many of you know, our daughter Sushila has been very successful in New York. We're incredibly proud of what she's accomplished." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. "In fact, she's done so well that she recently purchased a magnificent penthouse in Manhattan." I felt every eye in the room turn to me. Tommy's face had gone pale. Rebecca looked confused. "Success like that comes with responsibility," Dad continued. "Family responsibility. Which is why I'm sure you'll all join me in congratulating Sushila on her decision to." "Dad." My voice cut through the room like a blade. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Don't." The silence that followed was absolute. 150 wedding guests watched as father and daughter faced off across a table laden with crystal and silver. The moment of truth had arrived. In front of everyone who mattered, I was about to make a choice that would change everything. The silence stretched like a taut wire about to snap. I could hear the soft clink of ice in water glasses, the distant sound of kitchen staff, but nothing else. Every person in that elegant reception hall was holding their breath. "Sit down, Sushila," Dad said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the room. "No, I won't sit down. And I won't let you turn Tommy's wedding into a business meeting." I looked around the room at faces I'd known my whole life: family friends, distant relatives, Tommy's college buddies. "This is supposed to be a celebration of love, not an intervention." Mom stood up, her voice pitched to carry the perfect note of wounded motherhood. "Darling, we're just trying to help Carlos get back on his feet. Surely you understand family obligation." "What I understand," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands, "is that you ambushed me yesterday with demands I never agreed to. What I understand is that you're trying to manipulate me in front of all these people because you think I'll be too embarrassed to say no." Carlos shifted in his seat. "Sushila, come on. It's not like that. Isn't it?" I turned to face him directly. "When exactly did you and I discuss this arrangement, Carlos? When did I ever say I was willing to hand over my home?" "You didn't have to say it," Uncle Frank interrupted. "Family helps family. It's automatic." "Automatic." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Like how it was automatic when I was working 3 jobs to pay for college because the family money only stretched to cover the Golden Boys. Like how it was automatic when I lived in a studio apartment with no heat for 2 years while building my company. Where was this automatic family help then? "We gave you everything," Mom's voice was rising now, tears streaming down her cheeks. We loved you, we supported you, we believed in you. You supported Tommy, I corrected. You believed in Carlos. You loved the idea of who you wanted me to be, not who I actually am. Dad's face was turning red. That penthouse exists because of the values we taught you, the education we provided. The education I paid for myself with student loans I'm still paying off. My voice cracked with years of suppressed frustration. The values you taught me were about hard work and independence. But apparently, those only apply when it's convenient. Tommy stood up suddenly, his face pale but determined. Everyone, please. This is my wedding. Whatever this is about, can we please handle it privately? Your sister, Dad said, never taking his eyes off me, is being selfish and ungrateful. We're trying to help her understand her responsibilities to this family. By demanding she give away her home? Tommy's voice was incredulous. Dad, that's insane. Stay out of this, Tommy, Mom snapped. This doesn't concern you. Like hell it doesn't, Rebecca said, standing beside her new husband. This is our wedding, and you're ruining it with this ridiculous power play. I felt a surge of gratitude toward my new sister-in-law, but I couldn't let her fight my battles. It's okay, Rebecca. This was always going to happen. They've been building up to this for years. I turned back to my parents. You want to know the truth? I bought that penthouse because I finally had a home that was completely mine. No strings attached, no family obligations, no one who could take it away from me. For the first time in my life, I had security. Security. Dad's voice was bitter. What about Carlos's security? What about taking care of family? Carlos is 35 years old, I said. He's had 15 years to build his own security. I'm not responsible for his failures. You ungrateful, Dad stepped around the table toward me, his face flushed with anger. Ungrateful for what? For being ignored unless you needed something? For being criticized every time I succeeded? For being told my accomplishments didn't matter because I was selfish for not sharing them? The room was dead silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving. You want to know what I'm grateful for? I continued, my voice growing stronger. I'm grateful that I learned early not to depend on this family for anything important. I'm grateful that I built a life where I don't need your approval or your help. And I'm grateful that I finally see you all clearly. Dad's hand shot out before I could react. The slap echoed through the reception hall like a gunshot. 150 people gasped in unison. Someone, I think it was Rebecca, cried out. My cheek burned, but I didn't touch it. Didn't step back. Didn't cry. Instead, I smiled. Thank you, Dad, I said quietly, my voice carrying in the absolute silence. You just made this so much easier. I leaned closer to him, close enough that only he could hear my next words. You just lost me. Forever. In that moment of crystal clarity, I knew there was no going back. But what I did next would shock everyone in that room. The slap still echoed in the silence as I straightened up, my smile never wavering. Dad's face had gone from red to white, as if he was finally realizing what he'd done. But it was too late. The mask had slipped completely. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. I apologize for the disruption of this beautiful celebration. My family seems to believe that public humiliation is an effective negotiation tactic. I walked around the table, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Every eye followed me as I moved to the center of the room, between the family table and Tommy's sweetheart table. Since my father has decided to air family business at Tommy and Rebecca's wedding, let me set the record straight. I kept my voice calm, conversational, like I was discussing the weather. My parents cornered me yesterday and demanded that I sign over my penthouse in Manhattan to my cousin Carlos. When I refused, they threatened me. And now, when their intimidation tactics failed, my father struck me in front of all of you. The murmurs started then, rippling through the crowd like water. I could see phones being pulled out, fingers moving across screens. This would be all over social media within the hour. Dad, sit down, Tommy said urgently, but Dad remained standing, frozen in shock. The penthouse they want me to give away, I continued, represents 5 years of 18-hour days. 5 years of eating ramen noodles and sleeping on a pull-out couch. 5 years of risking everything to build something from nothing. It's not just a house, it's my independence, my security, and proof that I can succeed without relying on anyone else. Carlos started to stand, but Uncle Frank pulled him back down. But here's what's really interesting, I said, warming to my theme. This isn't about helping Carlos. This is about control. This is about punishing me for the crime of becoming successful without their permission. For the crime of not needing them anymore. That's not true, Mom said desperately, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When did any of you celebrate my achievements? When did any of you ask how I was doing during those brutal early years? When did any of you offer to help when I was struggling? I looked around the room. The only time I hear from this family is when they want something. We're proud of you, Dad said weakly, finally finding his voice. No, you're not. You're jealous of me. You resent that the daughter you wrote off as difficult and ungrateful turned out to be more successful than the golden boy you've been propping up for 35 years. I turned to address the crowd directly. I want everyone here to witness this moment. Because what happened here tonight isn't just about a penthouse or family obligation. It's about what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness, when they think love comes with conditions and receipts. My voice grew stronger, more confident. I came here to celebrate my brother's marriage. Instead, I discovered that my family sees me as nothing more than an ATM with a college degree. Well, consider this account permanently closed. Sushila, please, Mom was crying openly now. Don't do this. Don't destroy our family over money. I'm not destroying anything, Mom. I'm just finally acknowledging what's already been destroyed. I pulled out my phone and held it up. Carlos, Uncle Frank, everyone who supported this little scheme, I want you to watch this. I dialed my lawyer's emergency line, putting the call on speaker so everyone could hear. Mitchell? It's Sushila Wilson. Yes, I know it's Saturday. I need you to do something first thing Monday morning. I paused, looking directly at Dad. I want you to change my will. Every single asset, every penny, every share of stock, it all goes to the Children's Hospital of New York. Set up a foundation if you need to, but make sure my family can't touch a dime of it. The room erupted. Carlos shot to his feet, Uncle Frank was shouting, and Mom collapsed into her chair sobbing. But I wasn't done. And Mitchell? File the restraining order paperwork we discussed. I don't want any of these people within 500 feet of me or my property. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my purse. Sushila, Tommy said quietly, standing up. Please don't let them drag you down to their level. I walked over to him, ignoring the chaos behind me. Tommy, I love you. I love Rebecca. This has nothing to do with either of you. I hugged him tightly. Build a beautiful life together. Don't let anyone else's dysfunction poison what you have. Rebecca hugged me too, whispering, I'm so sorry. They had no right. No, they didn't, I agreed. But they did me a favor. Now I know exactly where I stand. I turned back to the room one final time. To everyone who witnessed this, remember that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect, support, and love without conditions. What you saw here tonight is what happens when people mistake ownership for relationship. I started walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back at Dad, who was still standing there looking shell-shocked. Oh, and Dad? Next time you want to slap someone into submission, make sure they still need something from you first. As I walked out of that reception hall, leaving behind the only family I'd ever known, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete and total freedom. But the real surprise was still waiting for me. I made it as far as the hotel lobby before my legs gave out. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation crashed like a wave, leaving me shaking on a marble bench beneath a crystal chandelier. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was having a breakdown in a space that probably cost more to decorate than most people made in a year. Ma'am? Are you all right? I looked up to see a young woman in a server's uniform, her face filled with genuine concern. She couldn't have been more than 25, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. I'm fine, I said automatically, then laughed at the absurdity of it. Actually no. I'm the furthest thing from fine. I just disowned my entire family at my brother's wedding. She glanced around the empty lobby, then sat down beside me. I'm Maria. I was working the reception. I heard some of what happened. I'm sure everyone did. I wiped at my cheek, which still stung from Dad's slap. I probably ruined Tommy's wedding. From what I could tell, your family did that before you ever said a word. Maria's voice was gentle but firm. My break's in 5 minutes. You want some coffee? You look like you could use it. Something about her straightforward kindness broke through my defenses. I'd like that. Thank you. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the hotel's empty business center, sharing terrible vending machine coffee and the surreal intimacy that comes from talking to a stranger who has no agenda. So let me get this straight, Maria said after I'd told her the whole story. They wanted you to give your cousin your entire apartment? Not lend him money, not help him get a job, but literally hand over your home. That's about the size of it. And when you said no, your dad hit you. In front of everyone. I nodded, gingerly touching my cheek. Jesus. Maria shook her head. My family's broke as hell, but at least when they ask for money, they actually ask. They don't demand I give them my house. The thing is, I would have helped Carlos if he'd approached me differently. If he'd asked for a loan to get back on his feet, or help finding a job in tech, I would have said yes. But demanding my home like it was their right? That crossed a line I can't uncross. Good, Maria said firmly. You know what my grandmother used to say. Mija, people will only treat you as badly as you let them. Sounds like you finally stopped letting them. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I left the reception. Text after text, call after call. I'd been ignoring them all, but curiosity finally got the better of me. The first few were what I expected, angry messages from various family members, ranging from guilt trips to outright threats. Uncle Frank promising to make me pay for this embarrassment. Aunt Patricia calling me a selfish, ungrateful witch. Carlos begging me to reconsider, saying his life was ruined. But then I found messages that surprised me. Tommy, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were planning this. Rebecca and I are on your side 100%. Call me when you're ready. Rebecca, what they did was unforgivable. You're always welcome in our home. And then the biggest shock of all, messages from people at the wedding I barely knew. Emma, Rebecca's maid of honor, I got your number from Rebecca. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. If you ever need anything, call me. 3 of Tommy's college friends had reached out with similar messages. 2 of Rebecca's cousins. Even the band's lead singer had somehow gotten my number and sent a message of support. Look at this, I showed Maria the phone. People I don't even really know are reaching out. Maria smiled. That's because they recognize courage when they see it. Standing up to bullies is hard enough when you're alone, doing it in front of 100 people takes guts. I don't feel brave. I feel like I just burned down my entire life. No, Maria said, standing up and collecting our empty coffee cups. You just cleared out the dead wood so something better can grow. As I walked to my rental car, I realized she was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading a phone call from home. Wasn't wondering what they'd want from me next. Wasn't calculating how much help I could give without destroying myself. I was free. The drive back to Denver International Airport took 45 minutes, giving me time to process what had happened. By the time I reached the terminal, I'd made several decisions. First, I was changing my phone number. Second, I was hiring a publicist to handle the inevitable media attention when this story leaked. Third, I was doubling the security at my penthouse. But most importantly, I was going to build the family I should have had all along, one based on choice, respect and genuine affection rather than blood and obligation. As my plane lifted off from Denver, I looked down at the city lights and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope. But the story wasn't over. In fact, the real surprises were just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in my penthouse living room, looking out at Central Park as snow dusted the trees like powdered sugar. The view still took my breath away, but now it meant something different. It wasn't just proof of my success anymore, it was proof of my freedom. The doorbell rang, and I smiled as I went to answer it. Tommy and Rebecca stood in the hallway, their arms full of takeout bags from my favorite Thai restaurant. Did you bring enough food for a small army? I asked, hugging them both. We weren't sure what Emma and her boyfriend eat, Rebecca said, so we got a little of everything. Emma had become one of my closest friends over the past 6 months. Turned out she was a brilliant marketing executive who'd helped me navigate the media storm that followed the wedding incident, as we'd come to call it. The story had gone viral. Tech CEO disowns family after father slaps her at brother's wedding, but Emma's crisis management skills had turned it into a positive narrative about setting boundaries and refusing to be bullied. The unexpected side effect was that my company's profile had skyrocketed. Applications from top talent poured in, investment offers multiplied, and speaking engagement requests flooded my inbox. Apparently, standing up to toxic family members resonated with a lot of people. How was the flight? I asked as we arranged the food on my dining table. Good, Tommy said, but I could see tension in his shoulders. Though we got some interesting news right before we left Denver. Oh. Rebecca and Tommy exchanged a look. Carlos got arrested, Rebecca said quietly. For fraud. Apparently, he's been running some kind of investment scam for the past year. I set down the container of pad thai I'd been opening. What kind of scam? The usual, Tommy said. Promising people huge returns on cryptocurrency investments, then using new investors' money to pay off the old ones. When it collapsed, a lot of people lost their life savings. Including some of the family, Rebecca added. Uncle Frank lost about $50,000. Aunt Patricia lost her retirement fund. I felt a complex mix of emotions, sadness, vindication, and oddly relief. How much? Total? About $2 million from what the police could track. $2 million. If I'd given Carlos my penthouse, he would have sold it and fed that money into his scam too. The realization hit me like a physical blow. There's more, Tommy said gently. Mom and Dad are facing some financial problems. Apparently, they'd been giving Carlos money regularly, much more than they could afford. They took out a second mortgage on the house, cashed in Dad's retirement account. I sank into my chair, processing this information. How much did they lose? Everything, Rebecca said simply. The house is in foreclosure. Dad's talking about bankruptcy. The doorbell rang again, saving me from having to respond immediately. Emma and her boyfriend Jake arrived with wine and laughter, filling the apartment with warmth and easy conversation. Over dinner, surrounded by people who actually enjoyed my company, I found myself able to think clearly about my parents' situation. After our friends left, Tommy, Rebecca, and I settled in my living room with coffee and dessert. They want you to know they're sorry, Tommy said finally. Mom especially. She says she understands now why you refused to help Carlos. Do they? I asked. Or are they sorry because his scam collapsed and made them look like fools? Both probably, Tommy admitted. But Sushila, they're facing losing everything. The house, their retirement, their reputation in the community. Dad's 72. Mom's 68. Starting over at their age. Tommy. I reached for his hand. Are you asking me to help them? No, he said firmly. I'm not. What they did to you was unforgivable. I wanted you to know the situation. I was quiet for a long time, watching the snow fall outside my windows. 6 months ago, this news would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and obligation. But now, I felt something different, sadness for the parents I'd wanted to have, and clarity about the parents I actually had. I'll make sure they don't end up homeless, I said finally. I'll buy them a modest condo somewhere, set up a small trust fund for basic living expenses. But I won't have a relationship with them. They made their choice when Dad hit me, and I've made mine. Rebecca squeezed my other hand. That's more generous than they deserve. It's not about what they deserve, I said. It's about who I want to be. I want to be someone who helps people in genuine need, even people who've hurt me. But I also want to be someone who doesn't mistake helping for healing. There's a difference between charity and relationship. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers for a 2-bedroom condo in a nice retirement community in Colorado Springs. Far enough from Denver that they couldn't easily show up at Tommy's house, close enough to decent health care. The trust fund would cover their basic needs, but not